think I was a rock star or something. Well, Tom asked me to come here. I was quite surprised. I'd been out of this business for 10 years and wanted me to speak about the beginning. I wasn't sure what he meant. Was the Big Bang Theory or creation or what? But we got that clarified. First, congratulations. I would be the first to say that I would never have thought that you guys would reach $1 billion in such a short period of time. It's absolutely amazing. In 1983, when Kona made the acquisition of R&M, I don't know what the actual numbers were, but there wasn't many of us, so it had to be less than $10 million revenue. So, like I say, that's a long way away. Okay, so for some of you, this story will be new. There's a lot of new faces in this audience. For some of you who joined like in the late 90s, or early 2000, this story is probably Kona folklore. For those who were here in the beginning, you guys lived it. So you guys can just sit back and reminisce. You pretty much know the story. Or if some of you who, like it's common in most Kona conferences, had a big night out last night, well, you guys can take a nap. I won't be offended. I've been around the Kona conference circuit for many, many, many years, and I know how some of you guys are feeling right now. Just feel free. Don't snore, though. Okay, let's start with the acquisition of Robbins and Myers Handling Division, which was the first significant acquisition in North America by Kona Cranes. Up until that time, the presence was mostly license arrangements with some selected crane builders in the US and Canada. But before I get into the acquisition of Kona, I want to set the stage in terms of the economy at that time. The economy was in the pits. It was as bad a recession as the one we just came out. The employment and unemployment level in 1990 was a rate of 10.8%. That's a really high rate. The 10 largest European companies, this was a worldwide recession. There was 12 million people out of work. So as you can imagine, in this kind of environment, there aren't a lot of acquisitions and mergers being made. There's a lot of sales being made of divisions, shutting down divisions, etc. I might point out, though, there's a difference in these situations as far as profitability is concerned. Now, in the US, most big corporations are beholden to quarterly earnings. So when you run into these kind of times, they start shedding divisions, shutting down divisions. I think in Europe, they have quite a different mindset. Their focus is much more long range in terms of this kind of action than in the US. So when Robbins and Myers decided to dress the bride, so to speak, and get rid of the material handling division in Springfield, as the head of that division, I wasn't entirely surprised. That's the kind of action you would expect in this environment. The R&M Material Handling Division, Robbins and Myers Material Handling Division, at that time was not a profit maker, and it hadn't been for years. And the structure of the business was awful. It was burdened by inflexible unionized workforce called the United Auto Workers. Very high social costs because it was an old company, an old division, and the workers were old, and the social costs were very large. And the parent company did not want to put a lot of investment in this division. There were other problems, too numerous to mention, but I can tell you this. I came to that division in 1978, thank you. In 1978, from Minneapolis, where I just turned around a underhung cane company called Twin City Monorail. So I came into this job and didn't take long to find that this was hopeless. I don't know if you guys ever been in a job where it's just bad. You feel bad and you don't know how to get out. You go to work every day and you know you can't change anything. It's just impossible to change anything for all kinds of reasons. So the president of Robbins and Myers was of the opinion that in the current economic time, there would be not a buyer, at least in the United States, for this sorry division. And he decided that we were going to liquidate it. I had mixed emotions about that. I was kind of glad in a way that it was going to be liquidated because I'd be out of this mess. But on the other hand, I needed a job. So I suggested to the president at that time, why don't I look for a buyer in Europe? There had already been some evidence of buyers, European buyers, kind of testing the waters in the U.S. So I requested to the president, let me put a dog and pony show together, go over to Europe and talk to some of these major suppliers in the hoist and crane business. I think I went to 4 or 5 of them. They were all very interested, but again, going back to the economic time that we were in, they either had no money or couldn't, or weren't out to look for any new companies. The last stop was Kona Cranes. I don't know whether they had the money or didn't have the money, but they were very interested. So we set up a trip for them to come over. And oddly enough, at that time, Kona had already been having some discussions with Yale. So, you know, they were serious about coming to the U.S. or to North America. That was my last stop. So let's move forward a little bit. Kona acquired the assets of Robbins and Myers Material Handling Division in October 1983. Lucky for me, I came with the deal. So I got a job. Robbins and Myers was so eager to sell that division, they accepted a price well below book value of assets. I don't know what the exact number was, but it created profit in itself. We had to write up the assets. And I think that this acquisition of Robbins and Myers Hoist and Crane Division was probably one of the, had the biggest rate of return of most acquisitions made. Like I say, they got a bargain deal, a big bargain deal, and we were able to turn this plant around with the help of some Finnish manufacturing engineers and get it up and running in about a year. And now that we were still producing product the old way. But at the same time, the manufacturing engineers were totally restructuring the manufacturing area while we were doing this. Okay, so getting back to the very beginning of the acquisition, the day after Kona and Robbins and Myers signed a purchase agreement, I terminated all the employees. That's the first time I've ever done that. I usually just terminate a few at a time. That was kind of a scary thing, you know. I had to sit in my office and there's nobody to yell at, nobody around. So the next day, we started hiring back the ones that we knew were of high quality in the organization. We hired back production workers who were either anti-union or ambivalent. Now let me get back to this, how we were able to replace all the people and get rid of the union. There's U.S. labor law allow the buyer, if you take just a couple of simple steps, like terminating all the employees and then restaffing, but at the same time, the new labor force has to be at least less than 50% of the old labor force. So that's all you had to do. So and of course the union contract was with the parent company, Robbins and Myers. So they asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, the union asked me. I said, what am I going to do about what? He said, about the contract. And I said, what contract? He says, what do you mean, what contract? And I said, I'm not signing any contracts. He says, you can't do that. Well, we did do that. and we did it within, you know, the U.S. law. In fact, once we started hiring people back, I actually brought in a psychologist to design a test to determine whether that individual was either anti-union or ambivalent. You get the idea, I'm not in love with unions, right? But oddly enough, about that time, overall, there were a lot of companies taking those kind of moves, divorcing themselves from unions for various reasons. But in those early 80s, unionization of the U.S. labor force and industry was about 30%. Today, it's about 12%. You can see it's been a major change in the industrial environment. Oh, incidentally, anybody follow the Volkswagen story about the UAW unionizing, wanting to unionize their Chattanooga plant? Well, in this case, Volkswagen actually invited the United Workers in to their facilities to sell this union idea. Now, these people, either they know something I don't know, or they're totally uninformed about the U.S. trend. Incidentally, the union was voted down. They didn't realize they were dealing with Tennesseans. Okay, the key to, like I said, to our very rapid turnaround following Konecranes' purchase was our freedom now to entirely reorganize and restructure the manufacturing process. The end objective of this was very simple. 4-week delivery for electric wire rope hoists. So, when this was accomplished, I told our manufacturing people, okay guys, we're done, and now you need to produce hoists in 4 weeks, 4-week delivery. There was absolute silence. In fact, if you took a picture of those guys, they'd look like the Walking Dead. But they did it. I think they surprised themselves. They did it. And we did it consistently. In fact, we developed a program, a marketing program, and some of you old-timers know it, the SOAR program. And there were two major ideas in that program. Number one was guaranteed 4-week delivery. So we signed up in this program some selected standard crane builders, and we gave them a guarantee. So if they missed the delivery, we paid a penalty. Now you got to remember, we were just an also ran in the hoist and component business at that time. And I mean, I don't know what our place was. It's probably like 5 or 6 out of 7, I don't know. But we had to do something rather aggressive in the marketplace to gain market share. See, the other facet of that plan was a rebate program. So with these individual companies, we set a target for them. And for every hoist they bought, there's some amount of money to set aside for a rebate. So at the end of the year, then they would get paid a check for whatever it was. And we'd have a big conference and invite all these people that earn a rebate. And some of these people, not many, but some of them walked away with a check of $20,000 to $30,000. So in a business like hoist components, this was pretty jazzy. And to some degree, I guess it was risky, but we had to do something. So the time went on, and we began incorporating more and more content in R&M's hoist. And after a number of years, we deemed it desirable to leave the great American load brake behind and go to all Kona content. Okay. Now there's another part of the RM story besides hoists and components. Only a year after Kona bought us, Heikki Haavara, the head of Kona Cranes Hoist and Crane Group, came to me and asked me to start up a maintenance services business in conjunction with R&M Material Handling. Sounds strange, doesn't it, today? Well, it sounds strange to me then, too. But being a good soldier, I wanted to keep my job. I followed orders and began working on the task at hand. First question: who in our Robbins and Myers organization could fit this bill? He had to bootstrap a business from zero. I mean, there wasn't a serviceman at R&M. Okay? So he had to be young, no preconceived ideas, and he had to be energetic and positive because he was working himself out of a hole. And I thought, who in this organization could do that? Well, I was thinking, when I come to Robbins and Myers in 1978, we hired a young sales trainee. Upon the completion of his training, he took an assignment as a salesman in Atlanta, Georgia. Now this guy, I contacted him and I said, are you interested in this job? Make a long story short, yes, and he came to Springfield to work out of the hoist factory, the service company working out of a hoist factory. Okay. I think many of you folks have heard this company called, it's a moving and storage company called 2 Men in a Truck. This guy over here was one man. Okay, so off we went. The problem with obvious problem with starting a service company out of a hoist factory is we had very little installed base of cranes. Robbins and Myers was just kind of covered and made cranes, standard cranes, but they just kind of covered the area in the Midwest. And there wasn't that many standard cranes. And Kona's standard base was even smaller than that at that time. And at that time also, most of the service startups were on the back of their own branded installed base of cranes. And the business consisted of emergency repair, parts, modernization, capacity upgrades, that kind of stuff. Again, feeding off of their installed base. So we had hardly any installed base. So the market strategy for us was to promote ourselves as a provider of maintenance services for all brands of overhead cranes. And then we developed that name, Crane Pro Services, to communicate to all of our customers our capabilities to serve all types of cranes, because we couldn't be connected to a crane company. And the service emphasis was preventive maintenance. Now, this concept had been successful in the Nordic countries, and Kona, Finland gave some valuable guidance in that respect. But still, this young man was pretty much on his own. Selling an intangible product, as we all know, is hard sell, and you really have to believe in that concept. On the plus side, preventive maintenance, for the most part, by now had been accepted by the majority of North American industry. So preventive maintenance became our religion, and Tom was ordained as preacher. And he does that very well, right? So we decided early on that we had to look for some bolt-on type of acquisition to accelerate our growth into new regions. I mean, we were basically 2 men in a truck working out of Springfield, Ohio, around Springfield, Ohio. So we did make a small, our first acquisition was a small acquisition in Detroit, Michigan, called R&M Crane. Again, 2 men in a truck, or maybe 3 men in 2 trucks, I don't know. But and this is a beaut, Tom. Remember the second one? You remember the second acquisition? Wink Industrial Sales. I won't embarrass you by asking you to tell us about Wink Industrial Sales, okay? Maybe over a couple of drinks we can discuss that. It's kind of like a soap opera. Okay, the Canadians at this time then opened their first maintenance service branch in Burlington, outside of Toronto. And I think within a few years, 3 years I believe it was, they added operations in Montreal and Windsor. So we were taking baby steps at that time, for sure. But later on, we had gotten bigger acquisitions, more acquisitions, and basically the targets were to start up a region. As an example, I think we acquired a company called Action Crane Maintenance in the Los Angeles area, and that became the Western region. Of course, it grew by leaps and bounds, but so we started that region that way, and we started a couple other regions with a little bigger acquisitions. Okay, then the growth started accelerating. There were 2 things that helped accelerate our growth and overcome any threat of significant competitions. The first and foremost, of course, was the pioneering development of Mainman, the analytical and scheduling tool, which revolutionized the crane business from one of run and repair, wait for the phone to ring, to planned maintenance. And I guess you have to say that Kona Cranes was the leader. A lot of the competition tried well, they had their own software program, but it's all about execution, you know. So they didn't execute very well. The second thing that accelerated our growth was the development of the modular crane. That gave service a very good product that they could assemble in all these various branches. So if we had 40 branches, most of those branches were capable of assembling a modular crane. So the next several years, we grew organically and by acquisition. By 1994, there were 40 branch offices covering most of the US and Canada. So from the first year revenue of 500,000. Now I don't know whether I think that's a budget number. Did you make it a budget? You overdid it, right? 500,000, not for a number. The 1994 revenue then, we're talking 10 years, was 100 million in service. That's pretty good growth for 10 years. Okay, now let's move on to the crane business in North America. As I said earlier, when Kona acquired R&M in the early 80s, they had set up selected licensed crane companies in US and Canada. Most of these had ability to manufacture heavy cranes in addition to standard cranes. Mount Canada Limited was one of them in Montreal. Was another one, I think Kona Landell in Houston. So I imagine there was probably 5 or 6 of these crane builders. But what happened was, and that's not anything new in the industry, but when you set up a licensee like that, and they buy your hoist, and they build your crane, but they don't pay you money. And so these accounts receivable skyrocketed in these companies. So what to do? Well, the only thing you could do at that point, say, hey, I'm buying your company, and you discount it by that much you owe me. And that's what happened. So we ended up with wholly owned crane companies. Too many, more than we needed. And I've often wondered whether this was a preconceived Kona idea of an acquisition strategy, or it just worked out that way. So I don't know whether this was the plan from the beginning. We'll suck you in with all these these receivables, and then, okay, time out. We own your company. I don't think that happened that way, but could have happened that way. Okay, then a little later in Springfield, Kona started a standard crane operation using Kona components shipped from Springfield. So Antti Vahatalo, the Kona crane guru, came to Springfield and set up his Kona hoist and component operation in the same building as ours. So that's okay, no problem. So they set up, so basically they were setting up, competing with R&M. And that lasted for a number of years, and then eventually there was no need for that anymore. And but still, the result was it added to the installed base of Kona cranes. So now we're starting to build on an installed base of Kona cranes. So by the mid-'80s, Kona North America's business segments were R&M Materials Handling, Crane Pro Services, Kona Heavy Cranes, Kona Standard Cranes, all growing at a respectable rate and with few exceptions profitable. As we approach the end of the 80s, 87 or 88, Kona appointed Stig Gustafsson as the CEO. And the first thing that Stig did was to set up management by region. So I became then the Region Americas CEO at that time. Now, we called it Region Americas because we had a plant in Mexico and we had a plant in Venezuela. Well, as time went on, they both disappeared. Venezuela first. Thank God for that. We would have lost it anyway. Okay, then shortly after, in 1990, another recession hit North America. All of our businesses were impacted. Crane Pro the least, Kona Cranes the most. As I said, we acquired the Kona licensees. When we did that, we acquired a lot of real estate, a lot of buildings. Looking back, I think the slowdown in the economy made us realize that these acquisitions provide way too much capacity. The future of heavy cranes was to be one of slow growth and very cyclical. In short order, we began the restructuring process. We vacated 2 plants in Canada and 2 plants in the U.S. And we relocated that business to Houston, Texas. So when the consolidation was completed, the heavy crane business returned to becoming a consistent profit producer for our region. Okay, the next hiccup came in 1993. Let me rephrase that. That was not a hiccup. Severe heartburn. Kona Corporation decided to consolidate its activities in the elevator business and dispose of all other business segments, including materials handling. Of course, that created a lot of anxiety on our part. But the severe heartburn really started when we heard that one of the suitors for the material handling group was none other than our biggest competitor in North America, P&H. Okay, so as the discussions reached Stig's level, they turned to say, to the who stays, who goes, what are your responsibilities going to be, here's your compensation, et cetera, et cetera. I could tell you Stig did not like what he heard in that regard. The anger motivated him to search for another buyer. He found one and led a buyout with Industrial Capital, a Swedish private equity investment firm. So before this happened, or while this was happening, Stig and I had a lot of discussions about this, and we were drowning our sorrows in gin and tonics. And to keep our spirits up, Stig kept making this point, like, it's over, it's over. It ain't over till the fat lady sings. I said, okay, I'll buy that. So the good news that Stig and Industrial Capital had become successful was relayed to me while I was at one of these conferences in Texas at the Columbia Lakes Conference Center. As usual, and I'm sure they'll do it here too, they take the group picture. So we were all meandering around waiting for the photographer, et cetera, et cetera. And the staff member of the conference center came to me and said, Mr. Vanarsdall, you have a Mr. Gustafson on the phone, and it's very important. And I said, oh, crap. Good news or bad news? Well, I went over to the phone, and I was really nervous. I expected the worst news. So I picked up the phone, I heard Stig's voice, and he said, the fat lady just sang. So I keep that group photo, the one I'm not in, as a fond memory of that day, February 10th, 1994. So we dodged a major bullet. Then on April 15th, 1994, KCI Konecranes became an independent company. 2 years later, we became quoted on the Helsinki Stock Exchange. And that's kind of a record in itself. Most of these IPOs, the investment company carries them for 3, 4, 5 years. But our earnings were good enough, and our story was good enough, and the environment for IPOs was good enough that we went in 2 years. Okay, in Springfield in the mid-90s, we found ourselves short of hoist manufacturing space for region headquarters, staff space for Crane Pro services, and space for training facility. So we worked with our local industrial developers and found a site on the east side of Springfield near Interstate 70. We purchased a rather large site, or we're going to build 2 buildings, one for R&M, materials handling, and the second building for region headquarters for Crane Pro Services, administrative, and the Crane Pro Training Group. We moved to these in 1998. Let me go back at this point, because this is the point we made the conversion of the load brake hoist, the R&M load brake hoist to the Kona content. When Kona purchased the material handling division of Robbins & Myers, they wanted an entree into the U.S. wire rope hoist business, a launch pad for their other products. So during our discussions, before the deal was consummated, we agreed that rather than immediately simply take a crane hoist or Kona hoist and brand it, at R&M, we should continue producing, at least for a period of time, the existing design R&M hoist with mechanical load brake. And here's why. I might add, I got a lot of flack on this, because the easiest thing to do was to just make the production into Kona hoist and stick the R&M name on it. But I can tell you one thing, we wouldn't have grown very fast. So anyway, the logic behind this decision was the prominent hoist of choice in the U.S. market was a hoist with mechanical load brake. This design was written in the majority engineering specifications, government's specifications, etc. The large automobile producers, all these major customers. And in fact, the thing was that mechanical load brake was sold as a safety device, and of course safety was a big thing at that time. And it also kept the European competitors with their non-load brake hoists, that kept them at bay from really making an entry into this market. DMAG tried to make their entrance in they did make their entrance in this, trying to sell hoist and components to crane builders. They were not successful. Crane builders really didn't want them because their customers wanted a load brake hoist. So they ended up pretty much just building cranes in North America, or in the United States anyway. Okay, but as time went on, the presence of and the Kona's presence and brand recognition increased in North America. The conversion to R&M branding of a Kona hoist became less risky. So about the time we moved into the new premises I just discussed, we decided it was time to convert the R&M hoist to Kona content. So at this point, Region Americas was totally integrated then with Kona products. So that takes us up to the end of the 90s. And the region by now was organized for growth and profitability into the future. Maintenance services was to be the prime mover as we moved into the next century, and the greatest opportunity for fast growth and profitability. With the development of modular crane, the standard crane business had moved into the growth category. Standard cranes were never considered to be a growth business. But this made it a growth business because it's such a competitive product. So R&M had grown from a leading supplier of hoist and crane components to builders to adding a great array of Kona content, mostly through distributor products. And the heavy crane business was sized, more consistent with slower growth and the cyclical nature of the business. The only thing missing at this point was the big acquisition. Now, I can't tell you how many times we would sit down and talk with P&H, and sit down and talk with Columbus McKinnon, and they just couldn't get an agreement. We were close a couple times with P&H, but couldn't make the deal. Close only counts in hand grenade tossing. So I hung up my spurs. Some people think I probably hung up my spears, but I hung up my spurs in 2004. And of course, P&H finally came together in their senses and as to their real value, and the deal was made. So there we go. So with your sales of $1 billion, incidentally, you're twice the size of Columbus McKinnon now. And now the big dog on the block. So we've come a long way from the resurrection of a hoist company about to be liquidated, a two-man and a truck service business, the difficulties encountered in the heavy crane business, getting it up and running, and not to mention dodging the bullet when it came to that P&H buyout. It's not, I don't dislike you guys. I mean, don't get that idea. Okay? It's just the way it was. Okay, so it's been 30 years getting to this point, but I doubt that'll take that long to get to the next billion for you guys. That's my story. Good luck.